Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd and this is my review of Ahsoka. I previously made a review of the first two episodes and now I'm reviewing the whole season, and unfortunately I did not like it. I thought it was mostly boring. There were some little moments I liked visually, but story-wise it has so little substance. It's really about nothing. I mean, almost nothing happens in this entire season. And if it had some amazing visuals, then maybe a lack of story will be okay as long as you are so entertained by it visually. But even that was not really that interesting. I mean, it was okay on a technical level, but we haven't seen anything creative or imaginative. We just see the same stuff we saw a million times before. And a few times they even kind of borrow ideas from other movies and other shows. And so it feels unoriginal. And the most important thing is the lack of story. I mean, in any show, that should be the first priority. That should be the most important thing. If you can write on a piece of paper what this show was actually about and what actually happened, and you have so little interesting things to write, then what does that tell you? It's all about just the visuals, and the visuals are not that great either. I mean, it was okay visually, but not something so amazing that it's enough to hold your interest based on that alone. And I've talked in my previous reviews about how even the lightsaber duels and lightsaber fights and deflecting laser bolts back to your enemy and cutting up droids and all of that stuff is fun visually, but after you've seen it 1,000 times, it becomes boring. So they have to invent something new and shake things up. Otherwise, it will be boring even if it's visually good. And they haven't really done that. We do get the stuff with the witches, but I personally don't like the magic aspect of Star Wars, and they kind of went too much with it here. Like, it's all magical. They can conjure up swords from gas in mid-air, and they give their witch powers to Morgan, and then she also becomes a witch, but then she's basically on the same power level as before. So what exactly did it give her except a cool makeup on her face? What exactly changed about her except for that? Because remember, we saw her dueling Ahsoka before in the Mandalorian show. There was an episode in which they were fighting in a scene really similar to the ending of the first Kill Bill movie, by the way. And here we get the same. And so now she's fighting with some special sword that the witch has made for her, which has some green energy on it. And what does that change exactly? How is this different from their previous duel? And she seems to be on the same power level. And so what exactly changed about her just because the witches gave her that makeup? That is supposed to be significant somehow, and so all kinds of pointless stuff like that and all the magic stuff is not interesting to me personally. I would much rather more science fiction ideas. That's what I personally like in Star Wars. I like the science fiction elements, not the magical elements. And also the character of Admiral Thrawn is really disappointing because isn't he supposed to be some kind of super genius, a master strategist and tactician, and yet everything he does in this show is the opposite of that. He's a total idiot throughout. So I guess he kind of won in the end by escaping that galaxy, but it seemed to be out of luck, not because he was so clever. It was because the heroes were so idiotic that they couldn't accomplish anything. And also, this whole situation was caused by Sabine because she could have destroyed that map orb thing in the beginning of the season, and then none of this would be happening. The only thing they actually achieved was getting Ezra back, I guess. But if Thrawn kills even a single person in the galaxy after all of this, then Sabine will be at fault. So how is she supposed to be a likable character after all of this? Everything will be her fault, basically. And so Thrawn did not seem that intelligent or threatening in any way. And also he reminds me too much of Data from Star Trek because he behaves robotically and he has that black slick haircut and his weird skin and eyes, and he talks so robotically that he keeps reminding me of Data. So that's a little bit distracting. And I said in my first review of the show that if they go to some actual new galaxy, maybe we'll finally get to see some new things that we never saw before. And yet it seems like any other random planet in the Star Wars galaxy. So there are these turtle creatures, which again is not really original. I did like how their technology is also all based on turtle-like shells and all of that. So that was okay, I guess, but it could have been in any other planet. So if they went to some other galaxy, why can't we see something new and imaginative? And that's again one of my problems with the show. It reminds me of the recent Star Trek shows that cannot invent anything new. They keep having to borrow ideas from other movies and other shows and make their version of it. So the same thing here. It's just either recycling things we have seen in Star Wars before or from other movies, like that scene in which they jump off the roof and then they rise up because they're standing on that ship, and so that's exactly like in Back to the Future. and that scene when Ezra has to jump, that reminds me of Matrix. And when Thrawn escapes that galaxy, they show his cargo bay and he has some strange boxes with something that was never explained to us what that was, something he had to get from that planet into his ship. And that whole scene looks similar to the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and some people will say, oh, this is just a homage, it's deliberate. But to me, it seems uncreative and unimaginative. It's like they cannot invent something cool of their own, something new that we haven't seen before. They keep having to borrow images and ideas from other movies. And I think the most disappointing thing in this whole season was that whole setup in the middle of the season when Ahsoka supposedly dies and then she gets into that place between worlds and then she sees Anakin Skywalker and it was a cliffhanger ending. And so I thought in the follow-up episodes we'll get some actual interesting dialogue, we'll get some insights from Anakin's ghost about the nature of the Force or the future or his personal redemption, something, some kind of clever dialogue by him. But instead they just stand in that place and then they light their lightsabers and then it's yet another lightsaber duel. And then I really facepalm because that was such a missed opportunity. You get the same actor back. You have the perfect setting to actually talk with Anakin if it's actually him and not just a dream, which would be disappointing if that's the case. And so if you actually get to talk with him, then why not get some actual good dialogue on some actual insights about the Force or the Jedi afterlife or his personal redemption story or something, some kind of clue to that at least. Instead, it's yet another lightsaber duel, and then it's just a bunch of flashbacks to the Clone Wars. It was interesting visually to see that in live action, to see Ahsoka when she was smaller, when she was a kid, and see some scenes of the Clone Wars of them together. It was interesting visually, but other than that, is there an actual point to any of this? I don't think so. I did like those visuals of Anakin turning into Darth Vader for moments and all of that, so they should have done something like that in the dialogue as well, not just visually, but actually write something with substance. It was cool visually, but what was the story here? Why was there no interesting dialogue? There was no real insight about anything, so he just had to fight Ahsoka with a lightsaber, show her a bunch of flashbacks, turn into Darth Vader for a few moments to fight her again, and then she overcomes him, and then she comes back to life. So was this all a dream, a vision? Was it actually Anakin's spirit? We don't know. It's never explained. There is no really interesting dialogue by him, and later on we have another scene of some hologram recording of him teaching her something. And again, it was kind of pointless. It was cool to see a live action version of the Clone Wars, but other than this visual stuff, there is no real story or dialogue or characters. And the whole character of Ahsoka was really boring in this whole season, in my opinion. Like, she keeps standing with her hands crossed and just talking in a calm voice about something, so she has no real passion or emotion, and again, no interesting dialogue. And the only clues of something interesting is something that is never explained. And I'm okay with leaving something to mystery. I don't want everything to be explained to me, but something has to be. Something has to make some kind of sense. What do the villains want exactly? What was in those boxes? I guess we'll find out in some later season, but I don't even care at this point. Like, those witches have some magical powers that can revive dead stormtroopers back to life, and then we get zombie stormtroopers who are not more powerful than the live ones. And so what was the point of that? Again, it's kind of a cool visual thing. It was kind of funny, but then they dispatched them immediately again, and so what was the point of that? That's what I keep asking in this whole show. Like, everything is kind of pointless or silly or unexplained, and it keeps dragging from episode to episode, and there is no story. And that's why I really miss the old style shows in which every episode used to have its own short story, and that way they couldn't just drag it out endlessly like a very long boring movie. When shows back in the 90s, they could have some overarching stories of some bigger story arc throughout the season, but still every episode had to have its own short story. And that meant good pacing because they couldn't just endlessly drag things from episode to episode, and then even in the end of the season not really reveal anything. So I personally did not like the Ahsoka show. I found it boring, I found it unimaginative, with a very weak story, and even the action scenes felt either repetitive from Star Wars or borrowing ideas from other movies, and so it lacked imagination and creativity, and so I give it 2 out of 10. And that's me being generous because it did have a few little cool visual moments that I liked, and that's why it's not a 1 or a 0. So let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye.